Okay, today I'm going to be doing a drain and fill of the automatic transmission fluid from my 2007 Nissan Xterra. Now this is a relatively simple procedure of just draining 4 quarts of transmission fluid from my Xterra and putting 4 quarts of transmission fluid back in. Now, before we get into the procedure, let's just go through a couple things that you need and to get started. So the first thing you need is go through your Xterra manual, make sure that you are putting the right fluid in. I went through mine and it says I have to use Matic-J fluid. I went down to my local Nissan dealership and I just confirmed with the guy in parts that I can just use an over-the-counter Matic-J fluid. So I'll go over to O'Reilly Auto Parts and I picked up this royal purple synthetic automatic transmission fluid, and on the back for Nissan it says it's approved for Matic-J fluid. So now we got our fluid. The other thing I like to have around is my Hands manual. And in this guide, it actually goes through this procedure of doing a drain and fill of your transmission fluid. So it's always nice to have one of these around. It gives torque specifications and things like that. So let's go through a couple of quick steps of what you need to do to exchange this fluid. So the first thing you do is get your vehicle up on ramps or jack stands, and then so you have room to access the drain plug. Now it's kind of like changing the oil on your car. You basically just go into the car. We're going to be using a socket wrench, loosening the drain plug on your transmission, and we're going to be collecting, just like we do with engine oil, we collect it with a container. Now, what I always like to do with transmission fluid and CVT fluid is measure how much comes out of the transmission, make sure we're putting approximately the same amount of fluid back in. After we measure it, we're going to put our drain plug back in and torque that down. Then we're going to go back into the engine compartment, and we're going to fill the 4 quarts of transmission fluid back in. Now we're going to be filling it in through the dipstick. There's not a fill port for transmission fluid like there is for engine oil, so you're basically going to need a narrow gauge funnel to be able to put that into the dipstick hole and fill our transmission fluid right into the funnel. So relatively simple. Put your 4 quarts back into your funnel here and you should be good to go. Now we're just going to go and crank the engine back up after that and check our dipstick to make sure it's at the right level. So let's get into the car and get it going. Okay, I've got my Xterra up on some ramps in here to gain access underneath the vehicle and the bottom of the transmission and transmission drain plug. It's important to make sure that you have your vehicle elevated properly. I have my parking brake on, and I think I forgot to put my chocks in the back wheels, but I usually have chocks in the back wheels to make sure that it can't roll down the ramps while I'm working on the vehicle. Okay, here I've got my drain pan ready to roll under the car. I have got my creeper ready to roll under there. I usually keep some rags with me. I got my 19mm socket ready to loosen the drain plug. And all I have to do is get down and get into the car and loosen up that drain plug. Okay, I'm under the Xterra here. I've got my 19mm socket on the drain plug on the transmission oil pan. You can see that cross member there. I have to use that socket that has a little bit of variability to it on the extension so I can get in there. You can see I've just broken loose that nut and I'm spinning it a little bit. I'm going to take it with my hand and loosen it. And in the meantime, I am going to get my drain pan in the way. I was worried about it hitting that cross member as it came draining out of the pan and then splashing into my face. So I've got my drain pan in the proper position. And I kind of let it slowly drip out at first with my hand and that rag in the way so that it didn't go pouring all over the driveway or in my face. You can see the condition of this oil really actually isn't that bad. You can see it when you get the sunlight behind it. I changed this oil, or replaced about 5 quarts of this oil about 30,000 miles ago, and I'm going to keep doing this every 30,000 miles or so just to keep this oil as fresh as possible. But I'm going to give this 10 or 15 minutes or so to let this oil drain all the way. You can see the plug is actually at the back of this oil pan, so the fact that I've got the front wheels on ramps actually aids in draining it all the way out. Here's a little different view of the oil draining into the drain pan to get you a better idea of kind of what we're looking at here. This is looking from the front to the back, and you can see the transmission oil pan there and the oil plug and cross member as it's dripping into the drain pan as it's just about finished up draining. Okay, I'm getting ready to put the drain plug in. I've got my torque wrench ready. It's set for 29 foot-pounds, which I got from my Haynes manual. I'm just putting the drain plug in, finger tight, and then I'm going to move my drain pan out of the way after it stops dripping so I can get in there and get my torque wrench on that out there. So this is a 19mm socket set for 29 foot-pounds. It was really hard to film and torque this at the same time. So I actually changed my camera position here, and you'll hear the torque clicks here. And there we go, nice and torqued, all done. Okay, here I'm just going through the process of measuring the amount of fluid that I took out of the Xterra. I ended up taking out about 5 quarts of fluid. This is always a good thing to do, is measure your fluid that you take out. It's a good starting point of how much fluid to put back into the vehicle. After you do that, then you can go to your dipstick and see how much more fluid you need to add. But if you do a really good job of measuring, it makes your job a lot easier. Okay, now we're going to pull the dipstick, which is down the left side of the engine near the back, and we're going to pull out the dipstick. It's got this little L bracket on it that is used to have a set screw that basically holds that in place. I took mine out ages ago so I could check my fluid, and you can see on the dipstick cap it says it's for Matic-J fluid, which is what we're going to put in. And you see this is the royal purple Matic-J fluid that we're going to use. It says on the back that it's good for Matic-J transmissions. And I'm just going to install my funnel, my narrow gauge funnel, into the dipstick tube. You need a pretty narrow one to fit in there, and I'm just going to stick that down there as far as it'll go and set my funnel up ready to start filling up with fluid. Let's take a quick look at the condition of the fluid that came out of the transmission. I'll pour it on a little white paper here. You can see it's pretty brown. It's not in great condition, but it's not horrible considering this car has about 200,000 miles on it and only changed once. Okay, here I'm adding the fluid 1 quart at a time. It takes a little bit of time to get this fluid all into the Xterra here because the funnel is such a narrow gauge going into that tiny dipstick tube. But just take your time pouring it. Make sure that you keep your funnel firmly fixed into the dipstick tube. You can see me looking over there once in a while, making sure that I haven't pulled out the funnel, because obviously it'd be bad if it poured all over the place. So just one at a time. I ended up putting a little bit more than 5 quarts of this royal purple in there. I had to go to the store and buy a little more after I realized I was short. Okay, I'm just backing up my vehicle off the ramps to get it level for doing my fluid check. And on my initial fluid check, I was about half a quart low, so I'm adding fluid here. Just remember to have your engine running when doing your fluid check. The engine's supposed to be running at idle. I'm just going to add my extra half quart of fluid here, and then we'll do another dipstick check. I'm just going to wipe and check the dipstick. There's 2 hatch marks on the dipstick. The further dipstick hash mark is for cold, and the one further up the stick is for hot. It looks like right there I'm kind of low, and so I added some more fluid, and I'm going to do another dipstick check right here. And in this one, you'll see that it gets into the hatch mark of the cold section. Again, my engine's not real warm. You can see this at the bottom of that cold section hatch mark. I ended up putting a little bit more fluid in a couple of days later just to make sure I had it topped up perfectly. Thanks for watching this video on the transmission drain and fill of my 2007 Nissan Xterra. I ended up taking out about 5.5 quarts of transmission fluid out and replacing it with 5.5 quarts of the royal purple synthetic. Now, this car has about 200,000 miles on it, and I plan on doing this about every 30,000 miles, trying to get this car to the 300,000 mile mark. Either the engine or the transmission is probably going to be the one that fails, so I'm doing my best to take care of both. If you like this video, please leave a comment and a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, leave a thumbs down. Either way, I really like some feedback on these videos.